Alright, your boy Chili here. Welcome back to ROM hacking. We did our first work on our patch. We did our testing and it doesn't work at all. It doesn't work at all. So what's the problem there? Well, we're in the thick of it here. Let's do an attack. This guy has 18 strength, right? So we hit our roll. What are we going to roll? It is, let me find where D0 is. That's an F. So that's a 15. That seems like a good roll. Let's step over our detour and we go up to 2-3 hex, right? We expect to be very huge. We add a very huge bonus. Now let's step over here. Let's see what happens. You know, we're going to do a bunch of other bullshit. We're going to subtract the bullshit debuff. And here we're doing some range checking. Now we're going to compare D0 to the target, which is D2. That should be a hit. So we're going to branch. If greater than or equal, we should branch. And then we're going to set D0 to FF, we're going to assign, extend that, and we're going to return. And this shows that we should have a hit here, right? If I press F5, I should hear the hit, I should see damage. Nothing. It's a big miss. It's a swing and a miss. So there's something crazy going wrong here because inside the melee accuracy function, it is working as expected. Now what's actually going wrong here, it's not easy to figure out. I'm going to save you all the goose chase that I went on. But look here, I basically cloned the project. So now I have the original ROM in here with my notes plus the patched one. So let's open up the original one. Let's see what code we were originally working with here. We go down to the roll. Right after the roll here, you can see, yeah, we are reading the value from the script pointer, adding that to our roll. That is the magic bonus of the weapon. And then we increment the pointer because we have consumed that value and we want to, you know, point to the next thing in the script. And the rest of the program here assumes that that pointer has been incremented. Now, in our code, what are we doing here? We are also reading from the thing pointed to by this pointer and incrementing the pointer. The only problem is that pointer ain't actually getting incremented, and I can prove it to you. So let's do an attack with the thief here. Here we are. Let's look at what the script pointer is. A2 is right here. It's EA06. So after doing the roll and after doing my detour, that should be 07. And we can see it didn't change at all. Okay, well, we did the incrementing. Our code clearly says we incremented. Why aren't we actually incrementing it? When in doubt, let's look at what the compilers actually output. We look at the listing. We find the entry point to our function. We see at the very beginning of the function, we have this moveml function. It looks like it's moving like an immediate value onto the stack. This is, okay, so first of all, gas is garbage. It's a garbage syntax. This doesn't tell you anything, but if you look at the disassembly in a real dialect, you will see, so this is actually preserving registers onto the stack. So we can see this function, it saves the state of D2 and A2 and A3 onto the stack, and it is going to restore them before it returns, meaning that any changes you make to these registers, they will not persist. And that's 100% working as intended. The ABI of Motorola 68K is that registers D0 and D1, A0 and A1, they are assumed to be clobbered by the function. So the function does not have to save those registers. It can use them as it pleases. The caller, if it has anything important in those registers, should preserve them before calling the function. But the rest of the registers, they have to be preserved by the function. So anything you do to these registers, that will not propagate to the caller. And that's what the compiler is doing. It's just enforcing that. And the funny thing is, another interesting note, is because the compiler knows that it's preserving those registers. You can see here, here's where it does the adding from P script to our roll. It doesn't even bother incrementing A2 because it knows you're not going to use it later in the function anyways, so there's no point in incrementing it. So not only is it not getting incremented, but it is also being saved and restored. So there's no way for our function here to increment the P script A2 and have that affect the caller. So what we need to do here, I think it's pretty clear. All we got to do is go into here, we do add Q. So we increment P script after we do the call, and then everything should be fine. And I mean, since we're doing that, let's just do what we're actually going to do here. There we go. So, I mean, there's some things about it that I don't like, but this is the simplest solution. All right, this should do it. I'm going to build everything, export, and we'll do another test. All right, looks like Wild Pig is once again on the menu. Harambe is looking famished. It's time to get us some. So we are going to roll. Now we do our bonus. And yeah, again to 2, 3 hex. All right, so here we're comparing with our target. We're going to branch if greater than or equal. We're going to set, extend. All right, so far so good. And now we hit F5. And we actually hit this time. All right, so there you go. We have cleared this part of the hurdle. Things seem to be working correctly. Hurrah. All right, so our code base is already becoming peppered with these magic numbers that correspond to inventory items or, action cards, whatever you want to call them. I'd like to turn this into an enumeration. I've got this handy dandy list here. All I got to do is turn this into a C enumeration, and I can use it in my code. It'll make things a lot nicer. Now, I could data entry all these into Ghidra and then export, but I think it's easier to create the header file and import that header into Ghidra. And I could use some like regex to do that, but also I got my boy ChatGPT, so I'm like, yeah, here is a list of some bullshit, and please turn this into an enumeration. And it gave me this enumeration, and with a little massaging, I got my enumeration here, which is typed as an unsigned car. And I'm also going to go to my character sheet here and say that this inventory thing is actually an array of card. I could actually do array of card for all of these because these things, the spells, everything, they're all just card type. All right, so I made my has inventory item function take in a card now, and I call it with gauntlets of ogre power. So this is a lot more readable. Now I also want to fix this up. Now the problem is that var melee range check. So this isn't actually, I should rename this one. And I should also, I'll do a little work here to make this better. All right, so I renamed that global current action card -1, which is exactly what it is. And what I'm doing here is I'm explicitly recovering the action ID by adding 1 and casting to card, and then I can compare directly with my enumerations, and this all becomes a lot more readable. You can also see here I marked in the character sheet all these things are now card type. All right, the next thing that we gotta fix here is this bullshit debuff, and it's very simple. We can just replace these with no ops. They won't do anything, and it'll be all good. But you see that this code that precedes it, this is just code to see if we should skip the debuff. But if there is no debuff, there's nothing to skip. So we can actually just erase all this stuff here. And then if we erase all these, our branch here to skip should now skip to this line here. So, and I mean, skip player debuff, there is going to be no debuff. So this label doesn't have any meaning anymore. So I'm going to rename this one to skip excised garbage because this is all instructions that have been excised into our detour. And then we are going to change this target here to skip excised garbage. Now this no longer has a target. Let's just freaking clear everything. And there you go. So now we have eliminated that bullshit debuff. Very easy. All right, before we get too ahead of ourselves, I think we probably have to fix this now. We should set these bonuses to something real, not just these test values. So what should they be set to? That's the big question, right? And I've been looking at a lot of different rule sets. I looked at Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and I looked at the basic, and it seems like what they're using for THAC0, for these strength bonuses, they do not line up with Advanced. So they're almost certainly using a variation of basic rule set, but the basic rules are so over the place. There's so many supplements and different versions, and it's written in such an obtuse way. And I found that this Greyhawk seems pretty close. And there's problems with what they're doing compared to Greyhawk because for Greyhawk, you get different tables for hit probability and for damage, whereas they were using the same table for both. And then there's the added complexity of if it's a fighter, it gets an exceptional strength, which could even have more. So if you have 18 strength as a fighter, you also have a value between 1 and 100, basically, saying what your exceptional strength is. And that's not in the system at all for this game. So I'm like, what are we going to do here? But then I looked at something else. This is D&D expert rules. This was like published together with the first editions of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm doing a lot of learning here because I never played D&D. This compiles the rules and makes it so that they're not quite as dumb. It's still not the best presentation in my opinion, but it's a lot better than this crazy shit. Like, this is a lot more put together and consistent. So we're going to be using the D&D expert rules. I mean, they were published, I think, in like 1981 or something. So way before the game was made. And since the game is using basic Dungeons and Dragons, not advanced, it's almost certain that they were referring to this stuff. And here, the interesting thing is you see lots of different attributes. They have their own bonuses. They all use the exact same adjustment table. And that really jives with what they had in their code originally. So this is already looking very good. So we're going to use this as the strength bonus. Much simpler than trying to use what was in Greyhawk. All right, so you see here the values range from 3 to 18. And that's what I did here. Here is the same bonus for 3 strength, and I just continued the trend by 1 down to 0 strength. Now, since this is going to be used not just for strength, but for everything, we're going to change this to table attribute bonuses. All right, now the last thing that I want to change here before we move on to the damage calculation is this THAC0 stuff. So figuring out which THAC0 table to look up into and the content of those different tables. So like I said before, like the rules are all over the place, but if you look at the expert rules, it's pretty clear. You've got 3 tables that lines up with the game for magic users, for clerics, for fighters. Now it says thieves also use the cleric table, and dwarves, elves, and halflings also use the fighter table, and that does not line up with what I'm seeing in the game. Now looking at this table here, we can see that magic users advance every 5 levels, clerics every 4, and fighters every 3 levels. That is correct. So here we look at a cleric every 1, 2, 3, 4, they're advancing. Fighter every 3, and mage every 5. But there's still a problem here as well, because if we look, here's the armor class 0, so this is your THAC0. So for level 1, you would subtract 1 from 20. For level 4 to 6, for a fighter, you would subtract 3. And for level 7 to 9, you would subtract 6. So 1, 3, 6. 1, 3, 5. So they screwed it up here as well. You done screwed up. So we got 2 things to fix. We got to fix which classes for these dwarves, elves, halflings, thieves map to which tables. And we have to fix the values in the tables. Now, the fixing the values, that's very simple. But the decision of where to put these classes, it's actually trickier. Because we could put thieves in the cleric, making them worse. Because right now, thieves are the same as fighters. We could make them worse. But the thing is, thieves are already pretty damn bad in this game. Like, they have half the hit points of fighters. And they do get a little bonus on, leveling up quickly, but it's not that huge. It's not that big. And hiding in shadows doesn't really affect things until like pretty late in the game. So like I'm thinking thieves, they really don't deserve a debuff. Now on the other hand, halflings and dwarves, they might deserve being pushed up. On the other hand, dwarves and halflings, I think they might be good to push up to fighters because they have less hit points, and to balance that, they have better saving throws. Like they roll dice to see if they could basically dodge some things. So they dodge better on some things, but they also have fewer hit points. So that kind of balances out. So maybe they really should be like in the same class as fighters for their THAC0 to put them in line with fighters. Now elves, on the other hand, they get magic. All right. So yeah, they have fewer hit points, but they also get freaking spells. So maybe it might be nice to put the elves, keep the elves in the clerics, keep the thieves in the fighters. The only thing we would change is move halflings and dwarves from clerics to fighters. That's it. Now the only question is, can we fit that logic change into this existing memory? Because I would prefer not to have to do another detour. I would like to just do it in line here. All right, so I'm taking a different approach here. I'm going to galaxy brain it. I created a table of addresses. This is just a table of 3 pointers to these 3 tables. And then I have another table here that's going to map class index to this address, which then maps to here. And that will let me, it'll make my life easier. Trust me, it'll make things simpler. Stupid thing about Ghidra is it doesn't let you specify like a pointer data type and then just set the label. So I have to do define double word and then find the address and then type it into here. And then once I've got the bytes set up correctly, I can press P and turn this into a pointer. But you can't do that directly. Like I can't set it to a pointer and then edit this to point to the label that I want it to point to. Stupid. But anyways, who cares? And so here's my mapping. Cleric, that's 0, which is cleric. Fighter, that's 1, fighter. Mage, 2, mage. Thief, 1, maps to fighter, because we're gonna give him a little boost. Dwarf, maps to fighter, that'll keep things equal. Elf maps to cleric, because elf is a little OP, I think. And then halfling maps to, again, fighter. All right, so here's the trick. We gotta use the class number, the class ID, to look up into this table, and then use that value to look up into this table, and then use that value to look up into one of these tables. The tricky part is I don't know what syntax to type into Ghidra to get that to work. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna load the address of our table. And that's the table THAC0 class index.l. I mean, that matches this syntax here, LEA table THAC0 mage.l. We wanna load our, and then we wanna put that into A0. Now the funny thing is when we do this, doesn't put that in here, and I don't know what's going on here. It's just bullshit. I hate coding assembly in Ghidra. It's terrible. And then we're going to use D0 to look into that table and get an index. So the syntax is going to be 0x0. I'm just copying basically from here. We're using the register A0. And we want D0W. This is why we had to sign extend this one here. Times 1, right? Because each one of those entries is just 1 byte. Dot, and put that back into D0 as a byte. Now I'm wondering if I could put that into D0 as a word. No, it has to be a byte. Makes sense. So then I have to sign extend that to do another lookup. All right, so again, load effective address. Now we want our table of THAC0 addresses, .l, and put that again in A0. Now it is going to do this, but what we can do is we can now go to create memory reference, and that makes things a little nicer. All right, here's the moment of truth. Can I load into A0 with move.l? It's invalid. Oh my God. Okay, so how are we gonna do this? I don't know if this is the best option. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do the lookup into D0, and then I am going to move D0 into A0 with the move address long instruction. Okay, so this should now get me the address of my THAC0 table into A0. So now all I have to do is basically just put this instruction in here. All right, so there it is right here. I don't know what this offset tab mage thing is, but this is a byte table, so we just scale it by 1. And finally, we just have to branch to skip THAC0 lookup. And then everything past there is just garbage. Let's just remove this label. Remove this label. I don't know what these ghost labels are doing in here, but I can't seem to get rid of them, so we'll just have to live with them. Just a little bit of Ghidra jank for you. Apparently if I just clear with options and I don't remove the code or any of this other stuff, I can get rid of it. Okay, thank you, bye-bye. All right, so I'm gonna comment these lines here, and then I'm gonna I have a lot of testing ahead of me to try to make sure that all this bullshit that I just did actually works. Probably doesn't work, but I'll do that off screen, and when I come back, I'll let you know how it went, and then we will move on to the damage routine. Until then, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click the like button, helps a lot. And I will see you again with some more ROM hacking.